Now that I finished writing the first draft of my book and I am into revisions, I am researching a lot, everything I can find out about the submissions. Even though the submission stage is still removed, I'm not ready to submit yet, I still want to know as much as I can so that I can keep it in mind as I'm working on my book. Huge shout out to the YouTube channel Bookends Literary. It's a literary agency and they have been on YouTube for a while. They have a million videos on everything that relates to submissions. And in particular, one of their most popular topics is querying. And your query letter includes a blurb, so that is what I want to talk about today. The easiest way to find out what a blurb looks like is to look at any book you've got. Ideally, that's going to be a book in your genre. And where you can find it is always here. Sometimes it's also on the back, but here you will pretty much find it every time. And for this book, for example, A Box of Gargoyles by Anne Nesbitt, it sounds like this. For once, Maya Davidson is not worried. She's getting used to living in Paris. The terrible purple-eyed man is gone, and she's on fall break from school, free to spend time with her friend Valko. But something strange is happening in the city. Stone gargoyles that can fly and talk, women who sing in the streets as if in a trance, a shadowy person-sized column of leaves, and dust with hints of purple where its eyes would be. All of these come from a dark magic that ripples throughout Paris. When Maya receives a curious letter on her birthday, she discovers that the purple-eyed man isn't really gone. He's behind the strangeness, and now he has bound Maya to make him whole again by trading her life for his. And then the last paragraph just says a little bit about the previous book and the author and stuff like that. But that is basically the blurb. So the blurb is what sells the book. It's what sells your book to the agent first. Then the agent rewrites your blurb or maybe uses it as it is if it's great. And then uses that to sell the idea of the book, to pitch the book to the publisher. And then the publisher uses a blurb. Again, maybe it's very similar to your original blurb, or maybe it's redone and rewritten, but they use it to sell the book to the reader. So it is basically what the book is about, and there is science to writing a blurb. And so if you've never done it before, you will have to write it and rewrite it multiple times before it gets to the point where it is actually a good one to use. Because of that, as soon as I finished my draft, I wrote the blurb. The first version is something I shared with some people, including my writers group. But then I rewrote it a couple of times, so now I have like version number 3. And I can assure you that I will be rewriting this blurb multiple times to make it as catchy and as interesting as possible. So there is a whole process. So your original blurb is not what you're going to submit, but it's important to understand if your blurb is good before you submit it to the agents. If you just write the first blurb that comes to your mind, the first kind of like pitch that you have, and submit it, most likely you will not get many positive replies from agents because they see hundreds of those every week, if not more. And so to stand out in the sea of book ideas, book pitches, you have to really nail it. A lot of people are gonna recommend using critique partners or critique groups to get feedback on your blurb. And so one thing I learned, and I guess I did it intuitively, but I also got confirmation that that's a good way to go about it, from the Bookends Literary agents, Jessica and James, is that ideally you want to have a separate blurb critique group in addition to your regular critique group. So if your group has been reading your book as you maybe progress through it, or maybe afterwards, and then you present your blurb to them, their perception of your blurb is going to be tainted by their knowledge of the book. So because you are so close to the text and you know exactly what happens and what's important in the book, the way you perceive your blurb is subjective. And you want somebody's very, very objective view on that. Because when an agent opens your query letter, they don't know anything about you, about how wonderful your book is. They haven't read your beautiful writing. They don't know anything at all. And in most cases, all they're going to read are those couple of paragraphs. That's it. That's your only chance. That's like speed dating. That's a single opportunity you have to hook them and interest them in your book. And so it's extremely important. It might be the most important thing that you can write, that you can submit as a part of your package. So super, super important. You don't want to lose your only chance to make a very good first impression. And so that's why it is so, so crucial to know exactly how to write a blurb and then to give it to your trusted readers to get feedback so that you know if it's good enough or if you need to work on it more. And so I wanted to share how I went about getting feedback to my blurb. I do not have a separate blurb critique group, even though it sounds like a very fun idea. But because I wrote this book so fast, my writing group they didn't even know I even wrote a book, and they've never read a single page. And so I've decided before I give any pages to them, and I don't think I'm going to give the whole book to them, but I'll probably give like the first 10 pages or the first couple of chapters to them. Before I do all that, I decided I'm going to write a blurb and give it to them so that they can tell me if that is something that would interest them if they put their agent's hat on. And it's tricky because not every member of my writing group is interested in this particular genre. My book is a middle grade contemporary fantasy, and so some people are not interested in kids lit at all in my group, or they are interested but not in fantasy. But at the same time, you will have agents who represent multiple things, and so you don't know what their favorite genre maybe is. Maybe they like multiple genres and you're just one of them. So it's good to get perspective from unbiased people. And also you can present your feedback request in a way that's gonna encourage a good answer for them, even if they are personally not interested in this particular age group or genre. So I want to share the feedback request that I formulated to get the feedback, and then I'll talk a little bit about the actual feedback to my blurb. So the first question was, if you were shopping at the bookstore and picked up a book with this description on its back, would you want to read it? If you're not a middle grade reader, would you pick this book for your child or your friend's child? Why or why not? And then the second question is, what do you expect the story to be about based on this blurb? What are your plot expectations? What kind of ending are you envisioning? Question number 3. Are there specific parts in this description that stand out and make you want to learn more? Question number 4. What are the parts of the blurb you feel I could skip and still keep you interested? Any instances of confusing wording? 5. Is there information missing from the blurb? Are there parts of the story as you envision it that you'd prefer to be given more information in the blurb? And 6, any ideas for the book title? Well, the book title one is just my curiosity because I have a working book title. I'm not 100% satisfied with it. So I was just curious if other people's suggestions would strike a chord. But everything else has to do with their blurb perception. A lot of this I aimed at not just gaining understanding of if they would find this book interesting, but also at whether I present the book in a way that hints at the plot development enough while not fully revealing the ending. So in the blurb, you're not revealing the ending. You're just hooking people enough to want to read your story. In this case, the agent, if you are submitting and you're looking for representation. But even though you're not supposed to reveal the ending, what I see now that I'm reading the blurbs, because all I've been doing recently, like reading multiple blurbs whenever I'm at the library or at the bookstore, and I find out they actually give out much more than I give out in my blurb. In my blurb, I kind of go all the way to the inciting incident, and I give some information about the conflict that the character is having, and that's it. I do not go into the details. I'm hinting at the magical elements of my story, the fantasy elements of my story, but I'm not really providing much detail. And so that was one of the feedbacks I got, but I'll get into that a little bit later. But basically, yes, like you reveal a lot about what this book is actually about and what is actually going to happen. So like in this Gargoyle book, they do reveal a whole bunch of things, like women who are singing, this shadowy person thing with eyes, the letter on her birthday, which I assume is the inciting incident, and then exactly what this like villain wants to get from the main character. They need to trade lives, basically. So there's a lot already that they already told us. They could have told us that, you know, something's weird going on in Paris. There are some weird gargoyles. There are women singing. And she's getting this letter where she realizes that the villain is not dead. Like, in my opinion, that's interesting enough. But apparently, you need to reveal more to sell a book. You need to reveal more about what exactly makes this book stand out, reveal more interesting elements, stuff like that. So that's good to know when you're writing your blurb. Okay, and now I want to go into what I received as feedback to my blurb. I'm not going to reveal my blurb, even though it's not in its final form. I still feel like I would like to keep it private for now. If I do sell my book to an agent, or I mean, if I do find representation for my book, I will definitely share my blurb. But as of now, I just don't want to share it yet. But I will share general feedback that I got that makes me want to rewrite my blurb, and I will multiple times. Okay, so from one of the members of the writing group, I got the feedback that from my description, they could not quite figure out what the genre is. So part of it that was more focused on the personal conflict and maybe even like interior conflict sounded to them more like coming of age story. And another part sounded more like hardcore fantasy. So they couldn't quite place it in their head. Is it Percy Jackson or is it Diary of a Wimpy Kid, basically? And that was good to know. I feel like the reason I went into detail on conflict was because I wanted to demonstrate that conflict and relationships are going to be an important part of the book. But it looks like a lot of people, and that was feedback from multiple people, would prefer to know less about that part and more about the fantasy part. They wanted, because the main hook, I guess, is the magic and the journey. Well, to me, that's not true. To me, the main theme of this book is the relationship. It is more about the character growth and how their attitude and their outlook changes throughout the book. It's just in a fantasy setting, and their interior journey is paralleled in their physical journey of doing this fantasy quest. But people who were reading this blurb, basically all of them said that they would like to know more about the magic, and they were not as interested in the conflict in the description. So that was food for thought, and I'll definitely consider this feedback as I rewrite. I feel like they wanted more details, just like what I was talking about with this book. They gave out a lot of very specific details of what's going to happen, and so I feel like people want that from me. And so I'll keep it in mind as I rewrite it. And then they gave me specific phrases or words that they found confusing. Like, for example, something that I'm trying not to reveal too much. So I'm writing things like personal invitation or almighty being. And they're like, well, we need more than that. We need more specifics. Like, what kind of invitation? Who sent it? Well, maybe that's the part I don't want to reveal, but still, like, who's the being? The almighty being can be anything. So can you be a little more specific, like who they are? Because we want to know. So that's also good to know. They also want to know, when I was hinting at what the stakes are, they wanted the stakes to be more specific as well. Even though I felt like I gave enough details on that, they did not see it this way. And this is also helpful because, of course, as an author, I know what the stakes are and I know they are important, and I make sure to express it in my text that they are important for the character. But people who have never read my book, they're not going to know that. And so they wanted a little more specifics on the stakes and on what the good outcome could be and what the bad outcome could be. Basically, if I summarize the feedback, it's like be less vague and more specific, and we want more details about all the magic. But then I gave the same blurb to my writer friend, who also came back to me with some ideas for rewriting. But she also said she thinks it's pretty solid. Like, it sounds, I guess, interesting enough for her to make her want to read it. And then maybe, she said, once she reads it, she'll be able to provide more feedback on what exactly I need to feature. So that's good to know too. And then there was one guy in my writing group who I really liked their feedback because it was very honest, and you want honesty. You don't want people to say, oh, that sounds great, I would love to read that, because they are regular readers. So imagine that multiplied by 1,000, that's your agent, right? Because they see so many pitches, so many blurbs, they get completely desensitized, I think, to the generic descriptions or hooks. So you have to just nail it with the voice and the description and everything. Like every word in your blurb, which by the way should be pretty short. It's like maybe you have 150 words or something, maybe not even that, because your entire query letter shouldn't be more than 300 words. There's a limit on the words you can use, and so every single word basically needs to hit it. And so that's a tall order, but we'll work on that. So anyways, this guy, and it was funny because, the first question is if you were at a bookstore and picked up a book with this description on its back, would you want to read it? Yeah, so he sent me this feedback, and then he said, no. No. Not as is. This blurb makes me a little interested, but it's a bit too generic to make me really want to read it. And then when I saw him in person, he actually clarified that it's a pity, because he says this book sounds like something I would be interested in reading, and I love this genre and I like this kind of stories, but you didn't give me enough for me to want to read it, the entire thing. And so his feedback was so great. I have 2 pages of comments, and I feel like that's exactly what I need, because that's going to make the difference between me submitting a strong blurb and something that would generate exactly the same reaction from an agent as this guy gave me. So they might be like, oh, this sounds kind of interesting, but it's not quite, didn't quite convince me that I want to read it or something. So here's what he said. He said he's looking for, in the blurb, what makes this book unique and interesting. That's 1. And 2, what is the main conflict? And he thinks my blurb deals with the second point pretty well, but could focus on the first more. I introduce specific types of conflict, and he says, because I don't know this character yet, I don't really care about their problems, even though I feel like a little bit of a conflict introduction is good, but he's saying that mostly I'd like to know what happens. It makes sense, because the conflict, it's gonna become apparent even in the first 10 pages. From the first page, there is conflict on my first page, and I'm positive about that. So maybe I need a little bit less of that in my blurb and a little bit more of magic. He likes my protagonist, he likes the backstory, and he sounds unique. So he likes that. He also recommended that if I have any strange or interesting characters as an important part of the book, I could mention them there, the glimpse of what makes them strange and interesting, things like that. Feedback like that is really invaluable, because that's your chance to see your story with a fresh eye. I've heard of stories of authors, they used the blurb, they got a bunch of rejections, and then they rewrote the blurb, and with a stronger blurb, all of a sudden, they're getting a very high request rate. And so it is important, it does affect the outcome. Your book can be the best book in the world. Your first 10 pages might be amazing and you're attaching them to your query letter, but if the blurb is not good, none of this matters, because nobody's gonna read your book. Nobody's gonna read your pages. If the blurb doesn't grab them and make them want to read it this very moment, then that's it. That's the end of it. They will never see the book. They will just send you a form rejection, say, sorry, this is not a good fit for my list, and that's it. So that's why it's super, super important. The way you blurb is, it doesn't have to be perfect before you go on submission. Like by the time you go on submission, it has to be perfect. So get that feedback. Make sure the people who are giving feedback are not familiar with your story yet, so that they can see it from the perspective of an agent. And just know that whatever it is you have there right now, it can always be made better. It can always be better. Because when I wrote the first blurb, I thought, this sums it up so well. It's actually quite perfect as it is. And then I started rewriting it and I'm like, oh wow, okay, now I look at the old blurb that I gave to the writers group and I was like, this sucked. Like, it's not good. There's no voice in there. I don't like it. And so as I keep on going through my revisions process, from time to time, I'll be rewriting the blurb, tweaking it and changing it a little bit here and there. And hopefully by the end of it, I come up with something that's just so good, and that the right person who's interested in this kind of a story will see it and feel very, very positive about it and very curious about it. That is it for me today. Thank you guys so much for watching. How are you writing your blurbs? Do you research it somehow? How many versions do you have of your current blurb? I'll be curious to hear that. Let me know in the comments, and I will see you guys in my next one. Bye!